Good evening. Welcome to Workbench Wednesday, show number 1. I'm your host, Jed Hacker with the Columbus Garden Railway Society, and I'll be guiding us through tonight's show. We hope to make this an occasional Wednesday night program. The best way to find out about upcoming shows is clicking on the subscribe button and ringing the notification bell below. That way you won't miss any of our future programs. And if you enjoy this program, hit that thumbs up icon below. It makes us know we're being loved. Being our first show, we're going to keep it simple with a project I purchased off of eBay last week. And it's so easy, you can do this on your own workbench. Next, let me introduce our panel discussion, or our panel of discussionees. First up, you saw him interviewed on the last video from Easton Town Center. And if you have ever had a question about G-scale train repair or building a new layout over the past 30 years, you have probably talked at some point to Bill Logan. Bill, welcome to the program. And this could be a dangerous question, but could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in trains?
Welcome, Jed and everybody. Well, I've been a model railroader ever since I can remember, from kid on up, and I'm way past the kid stage at this pace of the game. I've been in garden railroading G-scale since about 1985, both as a hobby, and I've turned it into a little bit of a business, helping people build. Well, I design and we build and also maintain railroads for private individuals and even some of the commercial locations here in the surrounding Central Ohio area. Great.
Well, our next panelist is jumping into the garden railroad hobby head first. He was on this year's CGRS Open Garden Tour for the first time, and now he's working through the winter, filling up his backyard with a all-new train layout. He'll also be the host of the July 2021 CGRS meeting. David Bush, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit more about your G-scale train interests.
All right, thanks, Jed, and welcome everybody to our first show. Like Jed said, I'm new, so I forgot my first outdoor garden railroad running in July. That's when we broke ground, and it was running by August for the CGRS open house. So, Jed, you said this is going to be an easy show that you're going to give us today, but I'll be the judge of that. So being the new guy, I know nothing about a lot of this stuff. So I'm really interested to see this and learn. And my purpose here is to be that new guy and ask all those silly questions that I have no clue whatsoever. And folks that have been around a while probably know all the answers. So I'm here to learn. And before we dive too deep, I just want to point out with Jed and Bill, your backgrounds are so manly with tools and guy stuff, and I have pink ribbons hanging up behind me, and I'm confined to the basement for this, and it's been taken over by my 3-year-old daughter. So just want to get that out of the way up front. So turn it back to you, Jed.
Yeah, well, we're not going to judge you with the pink ribbons, because I saw your other wall, which had all of your marathon medals. And would you do a triple Ironman at one point, or a couple of them now? And so, yeah, don't worry, you're going to keep your man card.
All right, thanks.
So, well, we're going to jump into our project here right away. I'm going to cover just the basics of soldering. So let's turn it over to our bench cam. Let me get that loaded up here. And I've got my workbench off to my right, and it's got my basic tools, and my soldering iron is hot, so we can kind of go over a few things. Let me get the full screen here. Dave and Bill, if you wouldn't mind, just monitor the comments for me. And if you see a good question, go ahead, jump in with it. Or if you guys have any comments, feel free to jump in.
Will do.
All right, so let's first talk about soldering. Simply, no matter if you're soldering copper pipes in your house or tiny little electrical wires, it's roughly the same principle soldering. You're taking two items and affixing them to each other, not permanently, but let's call it semi-permanently. And if you've never soldered before, don't be afraid. I would classify it as only slightly more difficult than using a hot glue gun. But for tonight, of course, we're going to focus on soldering tiny wires. So items needed. You're going to need a soldering iron, of course. You're going to want one that has the ability to adjust the heat, and preferably with a small tip so you can focus your soldering where you need it, when you need it. I've got a spare soldering gun here that has kind of a small tip on it. It's like a little pencil tip. And let's see if I can get it against the white here. And so you can see how small it is. The one I'm actually going to demonstrate tonight, it's got kind of a fat tip on it. And it's a little messy, but it works and it's hot. That one's adjustable. This one is not. It was a $3 store find, and it's more or less junk. Go ahead and spend the money on a good soldering iron. Next, you're going to need solder. Solder with a resin core. The resin helps the solder flow when hot into the gaps in the wires, and it just helps it flow. And it should be a blend of 60% tin, 40% lead, of course, with the resin center. Or just make sure that on the package that it says electrical solder with resin core. It's highly recommended you work in a well-ventilated and well-lit area. I like to use some jeweler's magnification. They work great if you're getting a little older and your arms aren't long enough, to read the newspaper anymore. David, you'll learn about that in a few years. But,
hey, Jed, we couldn't see that when you held it up. It was off screen there.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. That's good.
There we go. I'm sorry. There we go. So
I think they use that on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Is that right?
Yes, it was probably came from the set of that. And you're not going to attract any women wearing those out at the bars for sure. So, where was I at? So you can find those on Amazon. They're pretty cheap. Let's see. Next comes preparing your wire for solder. You will stripping the wire ends can be a little bit tricky, but I recommend getting a pair of wire strippers that are made for small wires. These are from 20 gauge all the way up to 30 gauge, or I should say down to 30 gauge. So it's pretty small. The wire I have here tonight is 28 gauge. But what you need to do is you're going to strip it. If you don't know the gauge, start with the lowest number. That's the biggest size, so you don't actually cut the wire off with too small of the size. So you just go down until you find where it engages, and you'll feel you can get the wire off, and it strips right off. Now, Bill, you were mentioning last night that some wires get so small, you strip the wire insulation off of it, and you can't tell if it's any different in size. But this is still a decent size wire. And so when you pull it apart, it's going to have strands in it, like little fingers. And you saw me winding it here. You kind of twist it like a twist tie just to make it all into one solid piece. And then, if it's too long, you can cut it back a little bit. And there we go. So the next step for connecting two wires together, we're going to connect these two together. You need to tin the wires, and tinning is a basic principle here. You take your soldering iron and you put just a little bit on your iron here, and then you kind of paint the solder onto the ends of the wires, and you just give it a little coat. I know you're not going to be able to see what a perfect job I just did there of tinning those wires, but and you'll also find that these cool down really fast. I mean, I just had a 400-degree iron on there, and it's not even hot to the touch anymore. They just don't hold any heat. From there, you got your two tinned ends, and most importantly, you want to take your shrink wrap and put it over one of the ends, because most of the time when you're soldering pieces together, you won't have access to slip your shrink tubing on there. And I'll show you how that works here in a second. But I like to just kind of twist these wires together a little bit. And yeah, I don't have my good reading glasses on here, so this is really painful for me to see. But I know it's going to be really hard to see, so I'm just going to kind of walk you through. Basically, I've got my wires twisted together. They're already soldered. And if you've got enough solder on your tinned ends already, all you need to do is really just kind of touch them together, and those will solder together, and you just kind of hold it. And I can tell I don't have enough solder on there yet, so I'm just going to roll that on there. And I don't know if you can see the smoke, but you definitely don't want to be breathing that. So from there, you slide this shrink tubing over top, and you kind of seal it all together. And you should probably really use a heat gun on this. I don't own a heat gun. So you just kind of touch it real quick with your soldering iron, and it'll shrink the tubing over top. And voila, we have a soldered wire. And it should hold together. You should be able to give it a tug to some degree, and it shouldn't fall apart on you. Do we have any questions that's popped up at this point?
It doesn't look like any questions, just conversations about different tools that they've used. Looks like Dakman has joined us and says the Milwaukee solder iron is his preference. He brings it when he travels.
Yeah, that's probably having a good soldered iron. Is if you do a lot of it. Bill, I'm sure you do a lot of soldering. I'm sure you have a nice soldering iron too, or a couple of them.
Yeah, I use one of the adjustable or variable temperature soldering guns, which basically you can get an electronics house that gives you the ability to adjust the temperature, because there's the issue of soldering the wires. That's also an issue when you get to circuit board soldering. You got to really control the heat as minimally as necessary in order to prevent damaging any of the electronics on the boards, which is the most precarious issue. Probably the other 2 points I'll make here is it's always helpful too, and to have clean hands, wash your hands, if you will, beforehand, so that the normal oils that you have on your fingertips don't necessarily transfer to the wire as you're working on it. It just inhibits the ability of the solder to go ahead and fuse onto the wire connection. Jed, you can comment on, you have the alligator type pincer holder, which is I believe X-Acto, and a few other folks make those, which I have one too. It's a weighted base with adjustable arms and alligator clips that come in extremely handy when you're dealing with such small wires. And even if you're trying to solder on the boards and or parts of the railroad equipment.
Yeah, I picked this up at Harbor Freight a couple of years ago, and it's very handy. It also came with a magnifying glass, but that's long gone. It wasn't really in use. But the alligator clips are super handy. And I went off my script, and I was going to mention that purchasing something to, extra hands to hold everything together, because sometimes you just can't get it all together and held together.
Well, you got one hand holding the soldering gun, you got one hand holding a wire, and then that leaves the other wire to wander aimlessly unless you have something like your
right. You get your foot up here and you're trying to hold it all together. Yeah, it can be a mess. So definitely if you're going to do any sort of small detail work, you can see I've done some painting where I spray painted some red and some white on here. It's no longer a black and silver alligator holder here, but very handy tool. I recommend getting one.
Even in a pinch, and they still are available in the dollar stores, are good old wooden clothespins. Don't get the plastic ones. Get the wooden ones. They'll char, but they won't melt.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, I think you said it earlier. So not having ever soldered before and knowing that it would be beneficial to have a soldering iron for, the model or for the hobby. Did you say a hobby shop would be the best place to get it, or do I go to Arbor Freight, or do I go to Lowe's or Home Depot, or where's the best place to start?
In the central Ohio area, locations Harbor Freight offers a number of different types of soldering units. Here in Columbus, the company called ESCO, ESCO, handles electronics. They're the post runner, if you will, of Radio Shack here in Central Ohio. And they all, in fact, my soldering gun came from them. It's very precise, very, very, very well adjustable, and saved a lot of circuit boards for me. General Hobby Lobby, the type that Hobby Lobby handles are more like Jeb's, where the basic plug-in type that have a fixed temperature range, which are okay. I would caution you when it comes to circuit board soldering, because they tend to have an over temperature on them. But there's some locations here in the Central Ohio area that will give you some guidance on where to find those items. And if you're into the internet, well, of course, everybody's into the internet. I would go to Micromark, would be another excellent online location that caters to the hobby to begin with and has products of this nature to help out with.
Okay. Yeah. What about a price point, Bill? Just for something like not too extravagant, basic, gets the job done, and it's not the most basic, but not the most.
Well, I think, for example, like Jed's, your basic plug-in, 120 volt plug-in soldering iron. I mean, those are like 15. Those are going to range somewhat depending on the wattage, but I would peg them closer to around $15 to $20 these days.
Okay.
Once you get into the variable temperature controller type electronics device, you're gonna in fairness pay somewhere in the $75 to $100 for them.
Yeah.
So you have to be dedicated to do more soldering than maybe just the casual issue.
Right.
Yeah. The soldering iron I bought 3 years ago, and I bought it for stained glass work that I do. And it's an adjustable temperature, and it's fairly nice. It's always done very well. So it was $80 approximately, and it may have been on sale too.
If you're planning
on everything on sale,
if you're planning on any circuit board issues, I would highly recommend the more expensive units, because obviously if you screw up, you're going to blow $100, $100 worth of electronics boards if it's a sound board or a control board for a locomotive.
Right.
Yeah. So it all becomes relative there.
Good.
Okay. Well, let me get into the project now, and let me show what we have. It came. It was let's see, what's my script here? I bought these. A set of 2 end of train, or sometimes called a FRED, flashing rear end detector kits, on eBay last week, and for total, including shipping, was around $13, and it arrived in 2 business days. It's advertised as an O and S scale train light, but for what I'm doing on the back of my G scale train, it looks just fine. So the guy should advertise a few more. I did look on his eBay store, and there's only 1 left on his store, but he has a website, modeltrainsounds.com, and that's in the show notes already. And he has a whole bunch of different kits, mostly for O and S HO scale trains. But I think some of these are applicable to using in G scale. So it comes with this nice little baggie, and it comes all on this little styrofoam pad, kind of wedged in, This little yellow thing is the actual cover for the light, and that's on the resistor, 100 ohm resistor. And then we have a red blinking LED light. The two legs, positive is the longer leg, the negative is the shorter. It has full out directions of what we need to do, and has a light electrical diagram here of what's going on. You use a 3-volt 2032 battery, which is, those batteries about the size of a nickel. What I didn't really like the black and white because you can't tell if it's the red wire or the black wire so much. So I just went on his website, and he has the same pictures on the website, and you can blow them up and you can see it a lot easier. These pictures it's kind of tough to decipher which is red and which is black. And I just want to make sure I was doing it right. But it also comes with, a little on-off switch and the more shrink tubing, the battery case, some wire, and I thought there's a piece of Trident chewing gum, but it's not. It's adhesive glue, so it was a pretty bad experience. I'm joking. So the project was really easy. Just follow the directions, and yeah, there's a lot of soldering to do here. But it's very satisfying to get your whole connection together. And so what I ended up with is the switches on the bottom. I'm hoping you can see that. And then it turns on the light in the back. And okay, people are asking, oh, there's no hole in the bottom of your train. Okay, well, I did come in here with a drill and drilled out 2 small holes, and then I used a little X-Acto knife to square out the hole, and then I just friction fitted the switch in here, and I might glue it in eventually just for safety, but it's in there. I had a tough time taking it out when I needed to take one out, and I haven't done much of a job of putting these wires where they all need to be. I wanted to leave it loose so you could kind of see everything. But the battery, the switch is here, hooks up to the battery, runs through the resistor, and then I enlarged a hole. There's 2 holes on the back of this wall, on this back wall, and I had to enlarge it just a fraction of a millimeter to get the LED to fit through. And then I glued on with some CA glue the little light cover. And I think it does a nice job. And you'll see at the video at the very end of the show here, I have some nighttime shots of it running outdoors in my railroad. I shot that last night, not tonight. We got plenty of snow out there tonight. That would have been interesting. And there's not much need for you to sit here and watch me solder everything together, because I don't want to make this a long show, but if you use what I showed you tonight with soldering, you can do everything you need to soldering this whole unit together. The leads are long enough on the resistors and the LEDs that you got plenty of room to screw up if you don't get it in the first try. And, I think for one of them with shipping, it was $7 or $8. And boy, I thought it was worth it. It was kind of a fun project, and I've done only a little bit of playing around with lights and wires. This is my first flashing light, so it was fun to do last night. And I'm sure we're going to have some questions on how this all comes together. Have you guys seen anything yet on our comments?
There's some good comments and conversation going on, and I'll give Dunbar a shout out. When we were talking about the price of the soldering iron, and he makes out the point of spend $120 in the last 10 years of life. It's $12 a year. So that's in my back pocket when I talk to my wife. So thanks, Dunbar, for that. But
Well, I thought Santa already arrived at your house with a 23 gauge pin nailer the other day. That was kind of sweet.
Yeah, I am happy about that. So I can't.
Yeah.
Jed, I'll comment too. It would probably be for the long haul advantageous to consider some double sticky tape, the 3M type of square material on the inside where the battery is, just to affix it so it doesn't tend to rattle around over time. And still the opportunity.
I've got some of these 3M squares that are they're hook and loop Velcro. So, one side I'll hook up the battery and the other side I'll hook up but I wanted to kind of leave it loose so I could kind of show it. If it was all tucked away nicely, you may not be able to see it so well on the video. But yeah, that's the plan, was to kind of hook it all up so it doesn't vibrate around and knock around so much.
Have to go through some road tests in order to figure out how long the battery will last with the flashing LED. It should last, by the way, quite a reasonable amount of time. But
I think I read somewhere it's supposed to be 100 hours of continuous running.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that sounds pretty typical. But so basically once a year, you may find yourself wanting to swap the batteries out, and they're readily available at any of the drugstores, Walmart, many of the retail outlets. So no big problem there.
Yeah, they're readily available. And I did replace the batteries in my LGB passenger cars, and I had just a single LED hanging in the top of that, kind of a similar thing, but a lot simpler. And I accidentally left one of those lights on for 3 days. And I came back out to my shed and I saw the light on. I was like, oh no. I was like, wait a second, it's been days since I've been out here. And it was fine. It'd been on for at least 48 hours and maybe a third day. So they do last quite a long time. There's not a whole lot of draw. And, I figure if it's bright sunshine, I probably won't turn the light on unless it's during a open house tour or I have friends coming over.
Probably the key issue is as long you can replace that with any other battery, DC battery out there, as long as it's 3 volt, because the electronics and particularly the LED are predicated on the 3 volt condition. So stay away from the 9 volt transistor batteries, even though they last a lot longer.
Now, Bill, I will ask you a question here. Let's say somebody has a set of these LGB track power wheels. These are pretty sweet, where they just have little pickups that you screw the wire onto, and they're very nice ball bearing wheels. And would you be able, would the resistor take care of the voltage difference between the track, or how does that work?
Yeah, that'll incorporate some difficulty factors. 2 being, one, of course, the normal voltage. Well, the voltage on our train tracks run anywhere from 0, because you're varying the voltage for speed conditions, up to clear up to 20 some volts. That would you would have to have a resistor in line to limit the input to the 3 volt condition. And then you also have the polarity problem on the track. Would require a bridge rectifier on the circuit to allow just the standard plus and minus power to get to the LED. My suggestion is, hey, stick with the bat. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Get 100 hours out of that battery, run for it. I wouldn't make it more complicated than that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good suggestion. You lost me at rectifier, so
there you go.
Okay. But I see the comments here. People are asking if it could be run off of track power. Andrew asked that, and Dunbar asked that. Jed is reading my mind. Yes, I am.
Yes, you can for a millisecond.
For a millisecond, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's the one issue with any type. Most every LED on the market these days, straight out of the box, is predicated on a 3 volt DC input. So once you stray from that, you got to get into more electrical component or electronic components in order to regulate the power to it. Later on one of the other clinics I know we've talked about is the business of putting lights, LED lights, in the cars. And when we get to that, I think everybody will see that there is more electronics involved. Fortunately, the manufacturers provide them carte blanche. So when you open it up, you're still back to putting two wires together, and that's where your power wheel pickups will come into play on those units. But we'll deal with that in the future here.
Yeah. Well, I think we've kind of covered what we thought we were going to cover tonight, and we're about 30 minutes into our show, and we said we were going to keep this between 30 and 45 minutes. And so if we could wrap up with any closing comments, David, what are your thoughts here? You going to jump out and go buy a soldering gun and wire everything up tonight?
Yeah, it's tempting. Yeah. It's definitely on the short list. And yeah, I mean, it looks simple. At the beginning, you said it's simple, and it looks very simple. So it looks like it'd be hard for me to mess up, and I'm willing to give it a shot. So
and you know that you messed up because it won't work.
Right.
It just won't work. So you just do it again. And
I'll just use double-sided tape for all of it. So
yeah, and you could probably also get away with using electrical tape if you forgot to put the shrink tubing on there. So
yeah,
all is not lost. And I know they actually make like a paintable coating you can put on things that's like a silicone based or something. I've heard of it. I've never seen it for sale, but it sounds like a easy option if you wanted to do that. So in closing, to wrap this up, thanks Bill and Dave for joining me on the show. I can't do this alone, and we'll be featuring your train projects in upcoming episodes. You both have some great topics that we've already discussed. And so everyone out there I like to say tens of fans that we have watching. I appreciate you tuning in tonight and appreciate all the supportive comments. Thanks to everybody for taking some time out of your evening to come and watch the show. If you're looking to join a Garden Railroad Club, think about joining the Columbus Garden Railway Society. I'll be releasing a video soon about the top reasons to join the CGRS, and watch for that video to drop soon on YouTube. If you're already a member, I'll remind you to send your dues for 2021. If you want to go look at the website that Kent has put together, it's www.thecgrs.org for all the details. So now there's only one thing left for us to do, and that's go watch the video of the train running in the dark with the flashing light. So let's head out to the garden and run some trains. And good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Night, everyone.
Hey, guys. Thanks.